all for attending this special training session. Today we have a few presenters. We have Adele Page, who is with Legal Assist. We have Nikki Aiden, who is with DHS and head of the Emergency Rent Bridge. We have Jake Reuter, who is also with DHS. David Klein, who is with Stutzman Housing Authority. Rides with High Plains. And your video is off to just prevent less distractions for the presenter and those participating. And we will go from there. Nikki and Jake.
Well, thank you, everyone. As Kylie said, I'm Jake Reuter from the North Dakota Department of Human Services. And my role with the Emergency Rent Bridge is basically to provide as much support as I can to our star, Nikki Aiden, and her staff as they implement this, rapidly developed and hopefully very responsive rental bridge for folks during this crisis. And so Nikki and I are going to talk today both about how to apply for and the rent bridge as a tenant, and we're also going to work through how housing providers or landlords or property managers can apply for and participate in the rent bridge on with their tenants. So I'm going to let Nikki introduce herself, and we'll start the PowerPoint after that. All yours, Nikki.
Hi, I'm Nikki Aiden. Like Jake said, I'm the program manager for Emergency Rent Bridge. And I started with them in the beginning and have been with them the whole time. So we'll just kind of launch ourselves right into our presentation.
You can go ahead. It's ready.
What's that?
You can go ahead and share your screen.
Oh, I did.
There we go.
Can you see it? All right, wonderful. Okay, so as most of you know, Emergency Rent Bridge provides temporary assistance to families or individuals who've experienced loss of household income since March 15th of 2020. And the rental assistance is available to qualified applicants for up to 6 months for rent. And that's rent that's owing as of April 2020 or later. And we began the program with assisting with 3 months of rent, but due to the increasing need and the pandemic, we did extend that to 6 months. So we're going to go through the funding a little bit. We have secured funding through at least 2021, and it makes sense to extend beyond that. So we're currently working with an allocation of funds of $2.5 million in CARES funds. We're anticipating that we'll need to utilize COVID CDBG dollars sometime in 2021. So far, we have well over $1 million in payments that have been made, and this slide says approximately 1,900 total payments, but it's now over 2,000 as of this morning, in fact. So we have approximately 3,000 households or individuals that have applied, and about 300 of those, so less than 10%, we have denied. Right around 750 applications, but as of this morning, about 820 have been approved for assistance. And we have anywhere between 350 and 400 and under active review at this time. So about 1,170 applicants submitted their initial survey, but never have completed their applications. So we can get into that. It's kind of a two-part application, which we'll get into, but we have, you know, over 1,100 applicants that haven't followed up on their applications. So a little bit about ERB is that it can be used to pay rent that's owing, but it cannot be used for late fees or other penalties, and can't be used for security deposits. So people have often misunderstood the next section. Folks have thought that applicants are required to pay 30% of the rent, but in fact, they're required to pay 30% of their household income towards rent. So if a household has no income, then they would have to pay 0 towards rent. And we document their household income during their initial review. So ERB pays the rent directly to the housing provider, and the maximum rent that we can pay is determined based on fair market rent in their county, and it also takes consideration for how utilities are paid as well in that calculation. So to briefly go over what makes a renter eligible, it is that the residence is their primary residence, that they have a valid lease, and that lease would be contain the name of the property management company, the name of the applicant or applicants, and then the signatures of all parties. A renter will need to be able to demonstrate an economic hardship having occurred on or after March 15th. And we kind of use the threshold of 20% of an income reduction for that. Few cases we've been able to go a little lower than that, but generally we need to see at least a 20% reduction in income to demonstrate that economic hardship. So the household income level for applicants need to be at or below 60% of the area median income by household size and by county. They also cannot have received other rental assistance for the months that they are applying for emergency rent bridge. They can receive assistance for months prior, but if they're asking for assistance, let's say in August, they can't have received other assistance in August. So to briefly go over the application process, they complete a pre-qualification application on our website, and we'll visit that in a bit. And then ERB staff gets a notification that the pre-qualification survey has been submitted, and they begin to work with renters on collecting documents and information needed to determine eligibility. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Hello?
We can hear you, Nikki.
I think it was someone
okay.
that might have had their microphone on.
Oh, bummer. Okay, well then I'll just keep talking. So when we have gone through all of the review and we have all their documents and all that, we start the eligibility process, and that includes our calculations for how much rent will be paid, etc. Then the renter is notified of that decision. They receive a pre-approval email from us They're encouraged to provide that to their housing provider so that the housing provider can begin, you know, their registration process that's needed to receive payment. So once a renter is approved, they are required to recertify each month. We send out recertification emails around the 17th of each month, and they need to complete that recertification survey, and that tells us if they've had any income changes or rental status changes during that month. We'd like to mention that if a renter needs assistance with application or document uploads, you know, due to, you know, not having a computer or whatever, they can make an appointment with their local human service zones. They are helping us with the initial application process. Some of the documents that's needed, the list is pretty much solid. There are some times we need to collect a little more than this, but for the most part, it is government issued photo IDs. Like I mentioned, the valid lease, proof of earned income, which would be a letter from the employer or pay stubs. Sometimes we can accept tax documents if a person is self-employed. Then we also need proof of unearned income, which would be unemployment benefits, child support, TANF payments, SSI payments, stuff like that. We also ask them to provide us a rent ledger from the housing provider so that we can see exactly what's owed. And applicants also provide a statement to us that outlines the circumstances of their hardship, to include when that hardship started and then some details about how it came about. So for the appeals and denials, as I mentioned, tenants receive a pre-approval email, and that email contains a confirmation number, and it starts with an ERB, and then 3 zeros, and then whatever, you know, 4 digits, and it's unique to that applicant. Housing providers need to have this information in order to request payment for that tenant. Tenants who are denied will receive an email, and it states the reason for the denial, and that email will be needed if the tenant wishes to submit a declaration for the CDC eviction moratorium. So some questions we got at our last session we thought we'd address. One is that ERB can assist renters who live on tribal lands, and we can assist renters who live in low-income tax credit properties. But ERB cannot assist with subsidized housing, so government-sponsored economic assistance. So take a break here to real quick visit the website, and then we'll do some questions after this part.
I think you'll have to share and unshare Nikki's website.
Yeah. Right now I can't get the Zoom link to pull back up. Jake, are you able to share your screen? I am
Yes, and I'll
stuck
do that
right now.
I will do that in 1 second.
Oh, I'm having technical difficulties.
Okay. So I'm going to go to the website. All right, can you see the website? Nikki, are you able to see the website?
I can't see anything right now. The Zoom is not pulling
Okay.
up for me.
Kylie,
It's
can you
still,
see the?
I still see her PowerPoint.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Let me know when.
Go. I see the website, Jake.
Okay. Nikki, can you see it? Is she gone? We may have lost. Well, I think what she wanted to show everybody is trying to. This is the website that people would go to, and I'm trying to move this. Okay, so this is the website that you would go to apply, and to show you here's how it works. And it says renters may determine their eligibility and apply for rental assistance via the online application survey. And so it's a matter of clicking on this link. And did the application show up, Cheryl or Kylie?
Yes.
Okay. And so I know that Nikki has a framework that she can work through, but this is as easy as it goes. You fill out this pre-qualification survey, or application is a better way to think about it for folks. And you basically answer the questions, number of bedrooms in a unit, is this property your primary residence, yes or no? Do you have a lease, yes or no? And then are the drop down boxes showing up for you guys?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, good. And so then it asks, how has your financial status been impacted? When did that start? Talks about your monthly gross income, or you experienced your hardship. What's the income now? Monthly rent payments, checking account, savings account, that kind of thing. And then utilities, you pay utilities or not. Are you receiving assistance are you current on your rent? Have you received rental assistance in the last 6 months? Are you currently receiving it? As Nikki said, if you get a housing voucher of some kind, or your building has income-based rent, your rent will go down as your income goes down. So you already are receiving assistance. And then it asks about some of the economic that you might be receiving, which are all, relative, ethnic issues, which is something HUD asked us to do. And then you push submit. I mean, that's as easy as it gets when it comes to, completing the application for the rent bridge. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And did you see if Nikki was able to get back on?
I'm back. Can you hear me?
We did, Nikki. I walked through the application document that's online, okay?
Yep.
And did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
All right.
Okay. So yeah, we have a couple more slides in the PowerPoint, and then we'll
Okay.
call that a day. So let me share that. Go ahead, Jake.
Okay. Did you want to stop for questions about the rental application here, Nick?
Oh yeah, we sure can.
Yeah, let's do that. I saw there was several in the chat. So if you want to propose those questions to Nikki, that would be great.
Okay. Let's see. First one, do these guidelines only apply to North Dakota, or are they guidelines set up federally?
This is exclusively a North.
Nikki?
Yep, did you hear that?
No.
I said this is exclusively a North Dakota program, so things are only for North Dakota.
Okay. Does the tenant need to be a U.S. citizen?
All we ask for is a government-issued photo ID. So no, they don't have to be a citizen, but just that they have a government-issued ID.
Can this help with lot rent for a trailer a person owns?
Yes, it can help with lot rent, just not the trailer payment itself unless it's a rental. Hello?
What is the human service zone that has been spoken about?
That is part of the North Dakota Department of Human Services social service redesign. So the human service zone is essentially what used to be the social service office for an area.
Do they need to prove kids' IDs, such as birth certificate, social security cards?
Nope, we're talking about information just for adults in the home, so 18 and over.
I was told that if a person receives assistance, we can't apply late fees. On this presentation, it sounds like that is correct. Can I get clarification?
If a housing provider is receiving assistance for a tenant from Emergency Rent Bridge, part of the process to request payment is a signature, electronic signature on an acknowledgement that says they will not be charging late fees or penalties, and that they will not move for eviction, and that would include a 3-day notice.
Okay. Is unemployment income from COVID stimulus counted as income for this program?
Yes, the federal unemployment that they received up until July 25th, and I think there's a temporary one coming up too as well, but that does count as household income, yes.
Is this program available to those who have had previous criminal convictions?
We do not look into criminal history. This is based purely on income.
How do you deal with landlords who do not want to cooperate with process, either want to evict or refuse to waive late fees?
So you mean landlords who have been receiving payments but are still wanting to charge late fees and evict? Is that what you mean?
I'm thinking yes.
So at this point, we're working with the DHS legal department on issuing letters and some other actions. So for right now, I don't have a solid answer on that, but shortly in the future, we will.
If we as a landlord did a rent reduction for someone for 1 to 2 months, would they be disqualified for those months or complete?
No, we don't. We wouldn't disqualify for a landlord doing a reduction in rent. That's acceptable for ERB.
It is a long website address. Can you get it doing a search? Can you get to it doing a search?
I think if you would look like North Dakota DHS COVID programs. Jake, do you know what they search for if they want to do just something shorter?
Yeah, the easiest way to, let me share my screen, Nikki, and can show to do that. So, all right, can you guys see the COVID-19 screen?
No, it's still the PowerPoint.
PowerPoint. Oh, that is
Yeah.
it's so much fun. It says, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Still? Okay. So this is, if you go to the DHS website, this is what will pop up for you. All right. See if it'll go back for me. So I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to go to the North Dakota Department of Human Services. I'm assuming you can see this yet?
Yes.
So the best way to, you go to the DHS website and you click on the big red box that says COVID. And if you go screen down to housing and homeless services, you can click there, and where it says new emergency bridge, that's where you will go. Okay, that's the simplest way to go. All the documents that we have put out, if you have them online, there's quick links to everything there. So that's what I would suggest that you do.
And Jake, this is Jennifer. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just did a Google search Dakota emergency rent bridge, and it drives you straight to your main page here too. So
Okay.
just a Google will just get you there. Excellent.
So I know we've got about 15 minutes left to talk about RentBridge, but if you're okay, Nikki, I'll just leave it here on this page, and I'll come back to the PowerPoint in 1 minute. So
Yep.
I know we have a lot of housing providers on the call today, and so we just wanted to take you to the website. It says housing providers, what you need to know. And we want to be sure that housing providers understand that this is a program for you as well as the renter. This is certainly a way to continue to assure payment for rent so you can sustain your housing. This is a program designed to support both the business that you have as well as the tenants' need to maintain their housing. And so we realize that it's a bit of a challenge. And so obviously Nikki mentioned you need that number from your tenant, that emergency rent bridge ERB number. And so that's the first thing you want to do. To receive payment, you need to register with the Office of Management and Budget. It's a supplier registration, and I'll come back to that. It's a click link here. But I did want to show you that there's a tutorial listed as a link. There's a quick housing provider guide on how to sign up. There is help from Emergency Rent Bridge staff by calling this number or emailing our program. So we're here to help you complete that registration. The Office of Management and Budget also has a helpline for you. And so we have a lot of assistance available to help you through the process. And so the first thing, as I said, is to fill out, and I'm just going to click on the housing supplier registration, and please let me know if it shows up. Kylie?
Yes, yep, it's
Okay.
there.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Well, I just need to know. And so as a housing provider, those of you on the call, this is what will show up if you've never registered before. And, if you're a business or an individual, and you'll click on it and walk through completing the information required. And so I just wanted to highlight a couple of things while you're on the call. One is you have to establish a company identification number, and that's a number between 4 and 6 digits that you make up yourself and will need to remember. You need your tax ID number. You know, you're going to fill out your company name here. And the thing is tax classification. You know, there's a drop-down box that you can select: individual, sole proprietor, it might be a corporation. You upload your W-9 form here. So that's a critical thing to have. You just attach it here. The other thing that's really important is this: enter special program code. And we talk about that throughout, but we want to enter the right code, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. And so the next several pages, you know, there's just a little bit more information really targeted at how you want to be paid by the rent bridge, either by check or by direct deposit, okay? So Nikki, I'm gonna stop sharing that. If you wanna bring the PowerPoint back up.
Okay.
You can't, okay?
Nope, I can. I got it.
Okay.
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 I missed my spot here.
It's okay. You're doing fine. So here we go.
So there we go. Go ahead, Jake.
All right. So as Nikki said, prior to receiving payment, you need to register on that website that we showed. And there's instructions and videos, and we're available to help simply by on that. So if you want to go to the next slide, Nikki. And again, the phone number to call our helpline is 701-328-1907. And we have attached to the information sent out today, information that we'll go through shortly. But as Nikki said, you know, if you're going to participate in requesting payment, you do forego late fees and penalties. And we expect that you refrain from eviction during the months they're receiving the ERB. If you want to go ahead one more, Nikki. That's the contact information, and I'll let Nikki, when, you know, if you just want to leave that up, Nikki, can you bring up well, let me do that, okay? I'll just do it quick since I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, tell me if you can see the document on the page.
Yes.
I can.
Okay, so this is really designed for housing providers, and it's again attached to the document, just walking through so that you know the first step is to register on the Office of Management and Budget site. And so we talk through the process of clicking on there, on the web link. I would identify both the help that you can get from ERB staff, and wanted you to know that the Office of Management and Budget also has a helpline that can assist if you don't need us. You can go right to them if you want. Just a reminder of some of the information that you're going to need, like your tax ID, your W-9, and if you want direct deposit, or your banking information is available. Making sure that you, before, save that company identification number you develop, and then the special code, COVID ERB. If you don't put that in, then your registration won't show up when you try to bill us, okay? I noticed in one of the questions that one of the housing providers said that their location didn't show up. Typically the error is that the ERB wasn't put in, the code wasn't put in. and we can help you get that done. And if you want to call us, so and once you register with OMB, they're going to send you some emails. One letting you know that they received your registration request, and then the second one you're going to get what they call the supplier ID number. So we've talked about your company ID up here, right? The second number you're going to get is the supplier ID number, and so you're going to want to keep track of both of those. And so once you get through all that process and you get your supplier ID number, the second step is to complete your request for payment, okay? And what I want to do is just play this short video regarding how to request payment, and then we can go to questions, okay?
Good afternoon. I'm going to take a few minutes and walk you through the steps to sign up to become a housing provider and walk you through the steps to sign up to become a housing provider.
Jake, it's playing double.
Yep, I hear that.
Okay.
And we can't see it on the screen.
You cannot, okay. Well, it's a great part of all the fun we're going through these days. Okay, so maybe since we only have a few minutes left, Cheryl, let me see. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm just thinking that it would be helpful for the housing providers on the call to see that. So I'm going to go back to the link and try to reshare. Okay. Share again. I think I'm going to stop. I'm hoping that it doesn't double play again this time. If it does, we're gonna skip it, okay?
Good afternoon. I'm going to take a few minutes and walk you through the steps.
Can you hear it now?
To become a housing provider in
Yep.
COVID emergency rent bridge program. So you can click the link that you were provided, and it will take you to a page that looks just like this. The first couple of pieces of information that you're going to need actually will come from your OMB supplier record. So when you signed up as a vendor in the Office of Management and Budget supplier database, you've got a supplier ID and a company ID, and these are both correct. So I'm going to enter this in. 1, 2, 1. Oh, type it correctly, of course. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then my company ID. Both of these are numbers. So the supplier ID, just note if your number has zeros, make sure you enter them. Entering the zeros is important. And your company ID is kind of like your PIN. So this is a number you would have selected when you signed up in the vendor registries. This is your PIN. If you forgot these numbers, you can log back into your OMB account. You should be able to find them. And if you forgot how to log into your OMB account, you'll need to call the OMB help desk, which is 701-328-2773. So after you enter those two numbers, we ask for an email address. We ask you to enter it twice because we want to make sure we have it right. That's the primary way we'll be communicating with you. So that's why you're entering it twice. So it'll take you then to this next screen, and you'll see here that it's associated now, this record, with your account. And then the next thing we ask for is called a confirmation ID. And this is actually a number that is given to your renter. It is unique to them. So they will have provided this number to you. It always starts with an ERB for emergency rent bridge. Then you need a dash, and it's followed by several digits. That is your renter's confirmation number. And again, this is unique to them. So this is the number that connects you as a housing provider to the renter. And that's how we make sure that the rent payment gets to the right place for the right person. Then the next thing you'll see, it's a box that's called address or nickname. This is something that is also connected to that OMB database. And so you'll remember when you signed up there, you were asked to enter locations, which also could have banking information attached to them. So if you have more than one bank account, for example, this lets you pick which account, which address you want this rent check to go to. And sometimes it won't show up when I'm recording. So when you click this arrow, you'll see a drop down. And if you don't see it on your screen, just know that when you click it, you will see a list of all of the addresses that you entered in the OMB database. So you select the one that you want the rent check to go to. And then the last thing we ask is just for you to confirm the rent that's actually due. So you click this Add Past Due Rent button, and a screen will pop up. It'll ask you to select the month. So I'm going to say for the month of May, the rent that's outstanding for this apartment is $500. And then we ask, is that actually the full rent that's due in a normal month, or is that partial rent? In this case, let's say it's full rent, and I hit submit. So now you'll see it shows $500 of rent is due for the month of May, and that was full rent for that month. Now let's say that the renter also has past due rent for the month of April. So you can go back in, add another month. Let's say it's $200 outstanding, and that is a partial month's rent. Click submit, and now you'll see that's entered in the record as well. If you need to edit or delete either one of these, just click that little arrow and you can edit or you can delete. So this just helps us make sure we have kind of the right amount owing. Please also remember that the emergency rent bridge will pay for rent, but not late fees and penalties. So please make sure that the answers that you offer in this section are about the rent that's due. Lastly, there's an acknowledgement that just describes, again, what it is to participate in this program. You type in your name and your title, and you hit submit. And that is it. You'll see this message pop up on the screen saying that you have successfully entered your information. And then within a minute or two, you'll also receive an email to the address you provided that, again, just confirms, and you'll have that as your confirmation email that you have successfully associated your record with your renter's record, and that will be in touch once the review of your renter's application is complete.
Okay. One of the things I just want to remind the housing providers is that you only have to do that one time for each renter, but you have to do it once. If you go back in a second time and try to enter rent or some other information, it will give you an error message, which is good. You only have to do it one time. From then on, we will automatically make payment to you based on the renter's eligibility for that particular month. We try to make payment on a weekly basis for all those that have completed, all the renters that have completed their required either initial application submission or their recertification. So Kylie and Cheryl, I think it's best to open up to questions now. And
okay. We have quite a few. Will it cover rent deposit?
it will not.
If the applicant is currently on low income housing, do they qualify for ERB?
No. If they're already receiving rental through a Section 8 voucher, a housing choice voucher, a mainstream voucher, or their building is already receiving a project-based rental assistance, they're already able to have their rent reduced by the change of income, so they're not eligible.
So the human service zone here has been sending people to Section 8 for help. Are all human service zones aware of this?
Nikki, do you want to take that one?
Well, I haven't heard anything about this so far. I know if a renter's asking specifically for ERB, most places have been assisting them with applying for emergency rent bridge. So this is the first time I've heard that they're being sent to Section first.
Yeah, so, and I'm not sure what people are meaning by Section 8. You know, we've also been referring folks to the community action agencies for assistance. So human service zone staff are relatively new in assisting, but they have been informed, you know, given the fact that there's 19 zones and a lot of staff, it could be that the particular zone, or formerly known as the County Social Services Office, may not have been communicated to as effectively as we had hoped. But we can re-communicate with, and hopefully that will not occur again.
Okay. RentBridge doesn't cover a person staying in a hotel that has made this their primary living arrangement, correct?
That is correct. We had contemplated that, but we will fund a long-term stay hotel.
A tenant stated they had to cash out 401k to get assistance. Is that correct?
No, not from us. No, that's not a requirement at all.
Can I send people to human services here that have applied and are on a waiting list with section don't have access to applying online?
Was the question, can you send them to the Human Service Zone office
Yes.
in that case? Okay. Yeah, you absolutely can. Until they're actually receiving housing assistance from another, agency, we can assist.
Are there Spanish translations available?
That's something we're still working on, is translation services. So at this time, they're not available, but hopefully soon.
Is there a reason that a landlord have given for not wanting to participate?
Landlords have given all kinds of reasons, but I can tell you that the majority of landlords have been very cooperative and have appreciated the assistance in rental payment from their tenant through the bridge. Some of the smaller housing providers, maybe they're only handling one renter or two, and they may not have a lot of access to the computer, or they're unfamiliar with some of the technology. They may be unhappy with having to go through the process to accept payment, but that's the rare occasion, but it does happen, yes. Can't make them apply. If they do not want to participate, we have no recourse to force them to do that.
Does the renter then pay this money back?
Are you asking?
No. To pay the money back to Emergency RentBridge, I'm assuming is the question, and no, they don't have to pay money back.
Okay. Are you saying that we sign up as a business if we are a housing authority to help people who aren't getting help with rent?
So some housing authorities, will manage a building that is not receiving any sort of rental assistance. Many housing authorities around the state will handle a building that might have been built with federal dollars, but the rent is static no matter what your income is. And so, for example, Minot, their housing authority handles buildings that do not have, their people aren't necessarily on a voucher and their rent isn't adjusted based on income. If we have a tenant in one of those buildings, they certainly could have their tenants apply. But if the building is getting assistance with rent, they're not eligible.
The landlord submitted the tenant's number and received a confirmation ERB number. Landlord has received no email since. Tenant states she has received no follow-up. Who should she and/or the landlord contact in this case?
So what's likely happened is she may not have completed her application in the first. Once you've submitted that, once a renter's submitted the pre-qualification survey, Within 24 hours, they receive an email from the ERB program that has a link to upload documents. And what happens a lot of times is that folks aren't checking emails, or it gets lost in junk mail, and they don't complete the application by following that link and uploading.
I also have a tenant who has been approved for assistance. Neither her or I to make contact with anyone to follow up on status of payment, or what else is missing in at least a week. What is the best step to take, or who to contact in this case?
She's been approved for assistance, or I'm assuming what they mean is she was initially did the pre-qualification survey and it said she was eligible to be to receive assistance, and it still may be in the review status. We have someone answering the helpline, you know, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, 8 to 6 sometimes. So the helpline is the best way to go. Make sure to leave a message. Also that ERB email address that we provided, and I can share my screen again. But if you are just not having any success with contacting the helpline, please feel free to get a hold of me. Either leave me a voicemail or email me. And email is probably the best if you're having issues getting a hold of the helpline.
And the tenant pay late fees themselves if the landlord does not agree to waive?
No, the landlord does agree to waive when they submit the payment.
I'm guessing that housing provider means the landlord, not the Section 8 housing authorities.
It means the landlord, yeah. And Jake, I don't know if you had something to add to that.
I'm not really sure of the question.
Yeah, I think it's more just a clarification that when housing provider was used, they're meaning landlord and not Section 8 housing authorities.
When I say housing provider, I'm talking about, yes, the landlord, the property manager, or it might be the owner of the building. Yeah, not Section 8, that, or a public housing authority. I'm not talking about that. Now, doesn't mean that like the example I gave, Minot's housing authority has buildings that would be eligible, but so they would be a housing provider, right?
Our program at the Housing Authority is income-based housing. I've heard our residents can apply assistance, but it was also stated that if their rent decreases when their income decreases, they don't qualify. I'm a little confused. Can we offer this option to residents in public housing?
Not if they're already getting rental assistance. No. If they're all, and I know that some of the public housing authorities have asked about the rent bridge helping with the portion of rent that's owed by the renter after the voucher pays its share. No, we will not assist with that. Their rent is based on income, and if the renter is not being responsible and paying their share, that's not something we're going to assist with.
Pembina County Housing Authority is getting people who are sent by the Human Services here, and I have even gotten emails from them to send an application to someone who can't pay their rent, and no, they are not receiving assistance.
I'm not clear as to what that question is either.
Yeah. Let me see who it was from. Vicky Lee, are you still on the call? You want to clarify what your question was? No? Are you there? Okay, we'll just move on. How come it's being said to refer people to community options, but when tenants call, they say there is no funding available?
I'm not sure what they mean by community options. We only refer to the community action agencies, and I'm assuming that may be what they're meaning. We also, so some folks are going to the community action agency. The agencies are able to assist with application for the emergency rent bridge. Initially, still waiting from HUD that were supposed to be coming, and most of them haven't received the amount that they were originally supposed to get to assist with rent. So they're not able to assist the way they had hoped, in the way that the original information was produced. So the community action agencies really are not able to assist in the way they intended. That doesn't mean they don't have any assistance. It's worth calling them to find out what they have or may not have. So, you know, I'm assuming that's what they're asking about instead of community options. Community options is a nonprofit agency that does something completely different.
Then somebody just stated that I have had a private landlord who was not able to register on the website.
Well, if they're not able to register, they should call the number and we can have one of our housing provider outreach staff assist the individual. We've had to assist through paper, a substitute W-9 where we would send the document to the housing provider, they would fill it out, and then we would enter the information for them. We do not have access to a computer, but we can register every size. We've registered many private landlords that only had one property. So please call us and we will assist.
With the ERB number, this is a preliminary number. When they are 100% approved, will we be notified or just receive payment?
So the ERB number is the number that stays with that applicant the entire time, from the beginning of the pre-qualification survey to final approval. So it's not a preliminary number, it's their unique number for that applicant. So when an applicant is approved, when their income and all that stuff has been approved, they receive a pre-approval email and just they get that. And it doesn't have the amount of rent that they'll be receiving yet. But shortly after receiving that email is when we issue payment. And when we issue payment, the landlord and the tenant both get an email that breaks down the amounts that ERB covered and the amounts that the tenant will owe. So both the tenant and the landlord receive that same email.
Okay. Need a second question. Because an incomplete application will have the confirmation number, so how will we know to proceed?
One of the things that is important is if you have a renter that's applied, the best thing to do is make sure you're registered, and on the OMB website, when you get the ERB number from your tenant, you can go on and to that billing site that we showed the video about, and we call it associate or bill for the rent, okay? And then once they're approved, that will allow us to make payment. So my recommendation to the housing providers is to go ahead and sign up, and then when your renter gives you the ERB number, to go to that billing web and complete it for that ERB number with the months owed and the rent owed from that tenant. Don't wait.
Yeah, so the Yeah, the tenant does not have to be approved for the landlord to sign up and do their part. All you need is for that initial ERB number, which they get like immediately after they submit their pre-qualification survey.
Yeah, it's best to do it immediately.
Jake, this is Cheryl. I think the last few questions, would it be possible for us to send those to you and then you send answers that we can send out to everybody?
Yes, please, because I know we want to get on to the eviction
Yeah, we want
moratorium.
to move on to the eviction moratorium. And so we'll have Adele and Michelle and David pop on the screen. Okay, whoever would like to start can go ahead.
Adele, I think you can start. Or Dave, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how COVID relates to fair housing. So since most people want to hear about the eviction, you guys can go.
Sure. Well, I'll just give a broad outline and let David pop anyway. I don't mind being interrupted. So on September, it was announced that the president signed an executive order requesting the CDC to do something to stop evictions for non-payment of rent due to the pandemic. On, I believe it's the Tuesday before, it was somewhere around the 2nd or 3rd, they put out a quickly drafted moratorium order. It did not go through notice and comment, the usual Administrative Procedure Act requirements, but it has been broad. It went into effect on September 4th, is in effect until December 31st. And just to briefly talk about some of the qualifications under the moratorium, it's really important to realize that they apply to any single filer with an income of $199,000 or less this year, a couple or family of $198,000, or these are ors, received a stimulus check after the CARES Act, or was not required to file taxes in 2019. So if you fall under that, then you also, as a renter, and this only applies to renters, doesn't apply to home mortgages, you must, if you can't pay your rent, and this is a non-payment of rent penalties and fees moratorium. That's what it's focused on, but it's also focused on keeping people from being evicted. That's the CDC's link due to the pandemic, because we don't want people who are homeless or living in a congregate living facility. You absolutely must do every single one of these things. The renter must use their best efforts to find government housing or rental assistance. Beautiful segue into RentBridge, because that's what we need our North Dakotans to do. And when it says best efforts, I've heard of some landlords, frankly, who want to participate in the RentBridge program. Not sure why, because they get their rent paid, but they don't want to. Doesn't matter. The person may still qualify under the moratorium if they use their best efforts, meaning they apply. Be unable to pay rent in full because, and the because is important, of a substantial loss of income, a layoff, a loss of compensable work hours or wages, or extraordinary out-of-the-pocket medical expenses. And that's actually qualified as a certain part of your adjusted gross income. So there is actually a number attached to that extraordinary medical expenses. But the substantial loss of income or hours need not be due to COVID. So, I mean, that's important. It has to have actually happened. You can't have used your money to buy a car or go on vacation. But if you need to have, if you meet that qualification, it doesn't have to be due to COVID. You must make your best efforts to pay as much of the rental payment as possible. And that might come into play in terms of, seeking other assistance from churches or charitable organizations, community action, groups that might be able to help you with your rent. And then you must establish that you're at risk of homelessness or needing to move into a new congregate or shared space. Those are key, because that's how the CDC gets their hooks into the authority to do this. Those are the folks that are eligible. And if you are eligible, you need to sign a declaration that is a form. It's extraordinarily simple. You just need to attest to those things under penalty of perjury. So they need to be true, but you need to give that to your landlord. And it should apply to halt any stage of the eviction proceeding. So before they give you a 3-day notice, after they've given you a 3-day notice, or even when you're sitting in court, it should. There's a lot that's question marks here still for us, but it should halt it at that point. That being said, there are some reasons, and we really think our tenants need to be very careful that there aren't other reasons that they can evict you, despite in addition to, say you haven't paid your rent, the tenant, and they are behind in rent, but they have some other lease violations. So they need to be very careful to make sure that the sole purpose of that eviction is non-payment of rent and they meet those qualifications. And right now we are actually looking at some of those issues. I think we're going to see what happens in court about what that means. I'm starting to deal with it in my practice. And by the way, I'm Adele Page. I'm Deputy Director of Legal Services of North Dakota. We're the sole legal aid provider in the state of North Dakota. I do a ton of housing law on the eastern part of the state. But this is what I find interesting too, because I'm hearing the non-payment of rent combined with other reasons, and that the order put out by the CDC actually gives some guidance in that. It doesn't use the term material violations of a lease, which is something we often see, right? It says engaging in criminal activity while on the premise. So there's a limitation even there. 2, threatening the health or safety of other residents. These are all exceptions. These are reasons to evict someone. 3, damaging or posing an immediate and significant risk of damage to the property. 4, violating any applicable building code, health ordinance, or similar regulation to health and safety. So those are all, we don't see them that often. The one that worries me is number 5, which says violating any other contractual obligation other than the timely payment of rent or similar housing related payment. So the question is, what does that mean? We go back to our lease. That's the contract that is the underlying agreement between the parties. And what does violating any other contractual obligation mean? Does it mean something very minor that doesn't involve, we wouldn't even consider a material violation? We don't know yet. So we're going to have to watch the litigation in that regard. And as an attorney, I'm interested to see what it happens. It seems to me it ought to be a big thing because we're supposed to be violations here. The other thing that landlords need to know is that written into this order is the ability for prosecution against landlords who ignore the CDC eviction moratorium. So they've added substantial fines. I believe it starts at 100,000, goes up to about 250,000, and it can involve jail time for up to 1 year. I'm assuming that we're going to have issues of proof there, such as did they know, did they understand, when were they served with the declaration, was the declaration appropriately served, but we haven't seen most of those issues yet. But that's where we're at, and we're still in remember this started on September 4th. Today, the last time I checked, is the 17th of September. I probably know more than I did last week. We are starting to see challenges, constitutional challenges to the CDC moratorium. There was one filed in the Georgia District Court against the CDC. We'll see where that goes. Landlords are starting to challenge it, but again, if they don't challenge it and they just ignore it, I'm interested to see if we start to get prosecutions and those fines and penalties, because those are the teeth that's been written into this. So there's a lot that's unknown. There's a lot that's known. The declaration is very simple. You would have to do, I could send it to everybody on earth, but really all you have to do is, again, a Google search that says CDC moratorium declaration. It comes right up, print it out. And if you meet the qualifications and can attest to it under penalty of perjury, you should be protected. But the one thing I ask is the tenants be very careful not to have other lease violations that we're going to have to figure out whether they fall under those exceptions or not. And the courts are going to have to do that. And that is a big unanswered question. So that's my little blurb. I'll be quiet until there's other questions.
Okay. Thanks, Adele. I'm Dave Klein. I'm the Great executive director of Great Plains Housing. We're out of Jamestown and cover 6 counties, and right now I'm in my Carrington office today. This is a very challenging notice because it is something that is a very large change that happened in a very short time. And so we're all struggling with this, including HUD. I've sat in on conference calls from HUD DC with the assistant secretary, and it's been out very numerous times. This is not us. This is the CDC creating a directive. This is what has to go into place. The proper notices, making sure that a person is given that declaration. If you look up the CDC, but also I will tell you, I've got lots of information on our website, greatplainsha.com. And if you look on the updates, there's information on National Eviction Moratorium. I have several of the links on that story for Low Income Housing Coalition. And they have provided a lot of documents, including the sample declaration and how to provide that information to a judge. With that, when you're doing that declaration, I believe it is a matter of you're doing a declaration with the landlord, but you do not have to bring all this proof to the landlord as long as you're doing the payments. That proof is going to the court, not to the landlord. And so if you have to go in front of a judge, you have to prove all that, I think, is the way we're being told. It's the declaration that is important to the landlord. Proper notices also need to be given by the landlords and the housing authorities to make sure clients understand and know about this. So we were actually told by HUD to make sure our clients have been given proper notice, some sort of public notice on the website, newspapers, or letters to all clients that they are aware of this. We did specifically ask about websites just to make sure that people are aware of it. There are some things with the housing authorities too that HUD has made some different changes that we can go back a little ways to take a look at making changes on what rent would be owed if they lost income. But as Adele mentioned, the fines are huge. $100,000 fine per household per violation is a big youch. $250,000 fine if the person dies because they were evicted. So if there happens to be a cause, the person passed away, becoming homeless and whatever, that ends up being the $250,000 fine. So these are, the CDC doesn't impose minor fines. These are very large fines that they're typically in the medical fields. But we do encourage housing providers and others, post the information, whether it's, even if it's the landlord, post the information at your office, put it on the bulletin board that here's the steps that they would need to do. So you're giving that proper information out there. It doesn't require us to make sure every person in your county has received the mailing of it, but just those notices. And if a person asks, to point them to that area. And this, the person does have to meet all of those categories. It's not one of the 5 categories that Adele mentioned. It means to be all 5. We have seen a lot of people come up and ask about, just the income portion. Nope, you have to be able to show you have been trying to pay that rent, that you haven't been squandering the funds on purchasing a large screen TV or a car or something like that. You have to be trying to pay that rent. For housing authorities and even for the Rent Bridge program, it's important, even if your waiting list is closed, to provide some sort of flyer or notification that client can have. So if you have to, that client's going in front of a judge to show that, hey, the waiting list was closed, I couldn't get public assistance, or that Rent Bridge turned me down, or that there was no funds with Community Action or any of those other groups. Have that documentation. So it's, make sure that you have a flyer or some sort of form to be able to send out. But it also means if a person does apply to your wait list, to give them that letter, process things really quick, and make sure that they're knowing if they're eligible, how long it may take. And again, it's a paper trail for that tenant to help them stay housed, to help them with this declaration and this order. And it is something that, you know, again, it works with a lot of these other programs. The Rent Bridge Community Action has some funds that have been used from different things. Perjury is a big thing. So this came up in HUD's last week's call, I think we were on. HUD did talk about, remind your clients and the landlords that perjury, this is federal perjury, lying on these forms. This is not, you know, oh, I made a mistake. If they find that you purposely did something, this is federal perjury and can result not only in the fines, but jail time. And so it is something to be very serious about. There's a lot of information that we can provide that is coming from other entities, but this is very uncharted territory. And the first things that we were all questioning was, you know, could the CDC do this? And the answer came back, yes. And so some of those things are being challenged, but this is to help keep people housed under a health pandemic. It is not trying to force landlords to keep bad tenants or anything like that. We're trying to minimize health risks is what the CDC is coming across saying. And that means, you know, not having these people, not having families that are doubled up, or not having families that are homeless that could possibly be spreading or catching COVID or anything else. It's trying to keep them in one spot, reducing those risks to others. That's about all I had. I know Adele covered a great deal of my notes too. I think we're all kind of looking at the same page on this and trying to help everybody understand the basics that we know at this point in time. Michelle,
yeah, the one thing that I wanted to just add was that North Dakota does have state fair housing protection for public assistance. And so this really dovetails nicely into the Rent Bridge program and the CDC, which doesn't really provide any public assistance. We have public assistance. If you're a landlord and a tenant is reaching out to you about the Rent Bridge program, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a fair housing advocate, but I would suggest that, you know, you think twice about saying no, because it could be a fair housing violation. But also, the Rent Bridge is the way to get payment. I mean, I think the tragedy of the CDC moratorium is that I think more than 50% of all landlords around the country are small landlords that require, you know, it's 4 units and under, and that require, you know, the rent to be able to pay your mortgage. And so when the CDC, there's no payment for rent until January 1st, you know, that's 25, if one person doesn't pay us 25% of your income, how are you going to pay your mortgage? So the CDC does require the tenants, it doesn't waive their responsibilities to pay rent, but they will have to pay rent come January 1st. The fees are still there. So it's really trying, as Dave said, is trying to keep people housed, but it's not solving the economic problem. And so the economic problem is really the piece where the Rent Bridge is so powerful and so strong. So, yep, that's all I wanted to say. I have a conversation about fair housing in COVID, but I don't know, maybe we should answer some questions and we can do that another time.
Can I throw just a couple of comments in before we open that up? And I don't mean to interrupt you, Michelle, you're great.
No.
There have been a couple of things that I think, I'm so glad you stressed that all of these fees, costs, penalties, rent comes due in January unless something else happens, right? And so that's why Rent Bridge is so important. So thank you for stressing that. The tenant is the one who has the affirmative obligation to present the declaration, not the landlord to the tenant. So I have been seeing some things in the chat box about that. The tenant has the affirmative obligation. How should they serve it? Doesn't tell us how. If it were me, I would serve personally with an affidavit of service or by certified mail. I would do something where I would have some evidence or proof attached to it, but there's nothing in the order that tells us that that's necessary. But so proof is a big issue in this that we don't know. David said that we're going to have to prove when we go to court. I believe that that's what HUD is probably saying. The reality is we don't know. There are some states right now that are saying at any point they can ask for evidence. In North Dakota right now, we don't know. I would assume, and if I were lawyering an eviction proceeding that was proceeding despite the declaration, I would attach all the proof that they've applied for rent bridge and everything else. And I think that the tenants should be equipped to do that. But I agree, perjury is the power in that declaration that they're telling you that you're doing it under penalty of perjury. So if I miss those things, I apologize. I just think that they're super important. And if you do want to Google it, somebody said they couldn't find it. It's the CDC eviction moratorium. It should come up. I just checked. Thank you.
There's a couple of nonprofit organizations, the National Housing Law Project and National Low Income Housing Tenant. I don't know. I'll put them in there, but they also have some information that can help. And also, it's the declarations are translated into several languages by some of those groups.
That's a great thing. Yeah.
Adele, there's been a lot of questions in the chat box again around what obligation the housing provider has to make their tenants aware. And there's no direction around that, is there?
Zero. You know, I think that the CDC moratorium, if you read the entire thing, there's nothing in there that says that the landlord has an affirmative obligation other than to not evict or proceed with the eviction proceedings after they receive a declaration. And so there's lots of open questions, but no, it is the tenant who has the affirmative obligation to do this.
Emily, do you want to start with questions?
We answered this one. Where's the declaration document found? What about non-payment of utilities?
Not covered.
Not covered. Doesn't address that.
This one's a kind of a three-part question. Is it the resident's responsibility to then give us the declaration, or are we supposed to give it to them? You mentioned it being served correctly. Is there a form for that as well, showing you accepted it, received it?
No, there's no form. I mean, I'm a lawyer, so I like proof. But, you know, there's no form, there's no requirement. There's no affidavit required. There's none of those things, but it is the tenant's obligation to provide it to the landlord.
Okay, I think that kind of answers the next one. Do we as landlords have to inform residents about the declaration?
No.
No. HUD's got a good suggestion for housing authorities, but that's the only place where HUD's got power, and that's the suggestion.
So landlords have to tell tenants about the CDC form, but tenants do not have to provide proof that they have done this, even if they are paying zero. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think we've answered that.
Yep.
The landlord does not have an affirmative obligation.
Yep. Is there a document or PDF of the literature of the CDC moratorium that we can print for reference?
Yeah,
and I think Michelle supplied that in the chat box for the link. Just to make sure, so once a tenant delivers the declaration, we cannot pursue eviction at all, even if there is no payment, correct?
If they meet they meet the terms of the declaration, correct. David, you disagree with that?
No, I agree. I'm actually looking at the declaration online, or a copy of a declaration on the Low Income Housing Coalition's website, and I agree.
That is all the questions on that I have received.
Adele, will you go over the 5 points real quick one more time for qualifying?
Sure. Again, I'm going to stress that it's that fifth one that causes me the most concern. But number one is engaging in criminal activity while on the premises. Sometimes there's some language, and I'm sure David knows this, in HUD leases, it says on or off the premises. This says, and I stress, on the premises. So it doesn't say drug related, any criminal activity on the premises. Threatening the health or safety of other residents. So how that will be interpreted, that's not the quiet enjoyment. Remember, that's in our statutes and in our lots of leases. That's just like noise, those kinds of things. This is threatening the health or safety of other residents. So that sounds like a pretty high bar to me, but we'll have to see how the courts interpret it. Damaging or posing an immediate and significant risk of damage to the property. So they're not just saying damaging the property, they're saying immediate and significant risk. So those are the terms I would underscore. 4, violating any applicable building code, health ordinance, or similar regulation relating to health and safety. So what that means, I mean, if I were somebody saying I had a ability to evict under that term, I would be looking for a specific building code violation or some other regulation. We had a meeting the other day where someone asked the, I think, excellent question is if somebody had been diagnosed with COVID or regarded as having COVID or had a family member with COVID and didn't quarantine, would that be fall under that? The answer is, I think that it would be a violation of the public health law if you're not following a valid quarantine order, but you'd have to make sure it was an enforceable order. Michelle can speak to the fair housing issues on that, because you don't want to be regarded as having COVID because you happen to have been around someplace. That would be a violation of our fair housing laws. But the one that scares me is number 5, violating any other contractual obligation other than the timely payment of rent or similar housing related payments. So that's to see how that's interpreted. Does that mean a pet payment, a poop fee for not picking up after your animal? Does that, I mean, clearly it involves late fees. So, so we'll have to see what all of that means. So there's questions, but at least 1 through 4 seem to have a pretty high standard attached to them.
We have one more question. Is smoking in a non-smoking apartment complex classified as a health risk / violation?
Well, the number 3 language, and now I'm speaking very lawyerly, it could be threatening the health or safety of other residents. That's number 2. And I don't know, that would be open to interpretation. But for number 3, or rather number 4, it's violating an applicable building code, which those are private lease things, the non-smoking, or health ordinance, which is also a law, or similar regulation, also a law. So under 4, I doubt it. And we'll have to see what 2, threatening the health or safety of other residents, how broadly that is interpreted.
Okay, it looks like that is it for the questions. We really appreciate everybody taking the time to spend the afternoon with us. We appreciate the presenter sharing their information with us. Marilyn has sent out the link or the survey for today, and she will be sending out the link for next week's session on Monday morning. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.